Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Rugby League Roundtable. Today we are talking all things player welfare. I'm the host James Graham, joined by the administrator Tony Mestrov, coach Shane Flanagan, player Aaron Woods and journalist Brent Reid. We'll start off with concussion management. Aaron Woods, I'm going to come to you. Talk of reduction in contact in training. So it would be mandated and policed. Do we think that this is a good idea or it's got potential ramifications?
For an older player, it's a great idea. The contact's the hardest part. It's not always just the game. It's what you do at training. I don't know how they're going to police it, but that's the thing, Jimmy. Well, if you do reduce it.
I think in the NFL, it's led by the players that say, this is the rules, or this is what the recommendations to us from the Players Association.
So it's only a recommendation. It's not like
it's actually a law. It's a law,
mandated.
And I believe all the training has to be filmed and sent to the governing body that go over when pads and helmets are on versus when they're not. And I think it's an accepted part of the culture now that the players go, well, no, we're not doing that, and then therefore it's a level and fair playing field to an extent. If it's policed to 3 hours a week of contact, then that's what we do, and then it's all fair.
Well, I'd just love to know how they get the time frame of how much contact they can do.
Yeah, where's the Goldilocks effect, basically.
That's the thing, because you don't know how much is too much at the moment.
And how little is too dangerous.
Exactly right. Yeah. And that's something like, that'll be, Flano, when he does they do their performance meetings and they speak about what they've got to do at training. That's a big thing, because you want to be contact fit. Like, you go into a game and you haven't practiced and prepared properly. We have wrestle sessions as well. Does that come under the contact?
Well, yes, it would, yeah.
Even if you're just doing technique sort of things?
I think
that's what coaches will come down with. There'll be so many different, the whistleblowers are going to be the players eventually. If they, I don't see this working. Players like, what if you got a coach like Madge coming in at the moment? Everyone knows what he's like, his stance. If he might turn it against the players and say, we'll just keep quiet, get it done. Like, seriously.
You won't be able to.
Yeah. You can give.
There's only takes one player though, Woodsy. It only takes one player to blow it all up, and there will be a player who will blow it up.
What if the other players say he's lying?
An independent person at all training days, then.
So you'd have to get 17 independent or 18 soon.
Well, the way it works at the moment is, all training is videoed, and if we have a head knock, or obviously we've got our medical staff, our high performance staff there, and our doctor's on call, and he'll watch the video, the footage, and he'll categorise it at training, whether he has to have stand down or whatever it may be. And we've probably had a couple this year that have had the 11-day stand down because of training. My staff are a bit the opposite way here, and you two being players, and Tony, you playing as well, but they believe that practice prevents rather than more practice is going to give you a chance to have a HIA. So all of our say our outside backs, they're practicing their outside shoulder tackles, their jam, they're practicing all those tackles and about stepping in, where their head's got to be. So more practice prevents, rather than more practice opens you up for more chance of HIA.
Well, I agree with you, Flanagan. I think practice does prevent, but then how much is too much? Because what I've witnessed at certain training sessions, especially in the recent past, it seems to be more intense, and the collisions are at full game speed as opposed to that 50%. And then also there are some recommendations from organisations that say it's not about avoiding concussion specifically, it's about pure number of collisions. So the soccer, for example, it's heading has been taken out of children's sport because it's that you don't get concussed from heading a football, but it's just that repetitive nature of it that builds up over time. That then
really, so you can't head in junior.
It's been removed in certain countries. Yeah,
fair dinkum.
I think that it's a fine line, and the experts, within obviously the medical side of things, will talk to about a middle forward could have 50 collisions on a weekend. It's an average. A middle forward, a hooker. So, and then you're putting into his week as well, maybe another 2 sessions there of another 50. There's 100 per week. Where's the education and practice side of things to prevent? So it's really going to be interesting over the next period how much we have. We've got a tackle coach now that just concentrates on our tackle, positionally, what type of tackle is needed, whether you're in the middle forward, your size, blokes like Woodsy that are tall, and they've got a different technique than, someone like myself. So we need to practice that, and, the players that have got really good control. I have a look at Blake Brayley for the Sharks. He's not a big man. He plays in the middle, and his tackle technique is excellent. And, touch wood, he's had very, very little HIAs, hasn't got split. He's a pretty boy. So he's got good technique. And so it's, as I said, but if he doesn't practice during the week, it's going to open him up to injury on the weekend.
Don't you reckon there's no reward for the low tackle anymore? That's a problem in itself.
No point tackling low. What's big play the ball?
A lot of players get KO'd. There's a lot of talk that players actually get knocked out going low. That's one of the arguments.
The footwork of people these days is a lot better than it was previously. They used to just carry the ball and they were straight. Very little footwork. The middle forwards now have got great footwork and can get into space and change direction so quickly late. And then where he looked like you were going to tackle him, as you plant and dip, and also he moves. So and you put yourself in a vulnerable position.
Pace of the game too, like the line speed, you got to get up, hold your man, then go. And a lot of times when they go low and they hit the hips as well, like Flanagan says, with the late feet. So
I can't believe we haven't got contact. We've been talking about this for so long, bringing in contact restrictions at training. It should have come in 5 years ago when all this stuff was.
But as I said, I'll argue the point that some specialists, people say you need repetition.
I think the concussions concerns Flanagan, the talk of CTE, I think, then that will override all that. I think it's...
we would have had as a club, and a lot of other clubs, we would have had 3 to 4 at training all year.
3 to 4 concussions. It's probably 3 to 4 too many. Or the NRL
in
would
a contact
argue.
sport?
Well, probably. That's what they'd argue. I mean, particularly at training, do you really want to be getting guys
but that training
knocked
would be
out at training?
That'd probably be pre-season
I
training.
know what you're saying. I know in the general scheme of things, it's not a great ratio. But what I'm saying is I reckon the NRL would look at that and go, well, that's 3 to 4 too many that we want at training. And we often follow the US model. I reckon we're always 5 to 10 years behind the US. They did it years ago, being limited contact sessions at training. So, it's only a matter. It's a bit like the kickoff argument, maybe not to the same extent, but it's only a matter of. I can't believe we haven't done it already.
We'll get into the kickoff argument. Really, you said kickoff.
No, the contact sessions.
You said that. The argument would be that's 3 or 4 too many. I don't think you can ever reduce the risk to 0.
No, you can't. No, but you can try and limit it. You can certainly, by reducing the contact sessions, you reduce the chance of that happening.
Yeah, but then I think
potentially, maybe there's more games because of it.
Well, this is it then. If you're, and I think that's what Flanagan was trying to say, that if you reduce contact sessions, that all looks good. But if you're actually trying to deliver less concussions, what's the best way to go about that? Is that total reduction in contact in training, or like I say, try and find the Goldilocks effects where you minimise the risk at training by not doing too much, but then you have enough practice in there so players can learn the correct techniques and have that same level of time, because a lot of it comes down to timing as well, like the timing of collision. You speak there about players dipping low. That is all about timing, and because the attack is all about deception. You try and make the defender think you're going over here and actually you're going to go over here, which then if you get that wrong as a defender, you put yourself in a vulnerable position. So like, I don't know if we'll ever get the perfect amount, but
you're not, because it's a contact sport.
Yeah,
we never will.
Well, I think clubs care so much for their players these days. There's always the care factor is number one. I don't want to get too technical in it, but there's a couple of components of the tackle. So the first bit is the collision, your contact. That what what level do we do? We can do contact at 50%, 75%, 100%, and we will vary it. Okay, we're doing this contact session today. All it is about getting handles. Contact is 50%, and so on. Or we might be just worried about we'll have contact at minimal, standing, a metre apart, and we're just doing transition from standing position to the ground. No one is going to get KO'd or a concussion from that sort of contact. It's still contact.
Yeah.
Controlled.
It's controlled
Depends
contact.
how they define contact.
And then we
though, right?
we do ground control.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few components of the tackle. The 100% bit, maybe we go on 25 to 30 minutes per week.
But remember, like Flano, in our day, you didn't have any contact at all, did you? Like you really just hit the bags. You didn't do that till the weekend. But we've got to change something because there's a real danger and risk to the game. You've seen what's happened in England. There's class actions already going on, and that's what's going to happen here, right? So if we can reduce it in any way, I don't actually know what the answer is. There's far more smarter people than me that can do it. But we definitely have to reduce contact to training as a start, and the game's a different story.
Like, for me, is it on the administrators to educate the player on the inherent risks of our sport? A lot of people begin our sport and are unaware, and maybe they plead ignorance. I don't think you actually need a doctor's advice to say this game can have potential long-term consequences to your health. I was willing to accept the fact it reduced my lifespan.
Yeah.
Like that was something that I was okay with. But you know what? I was compensated financially and through connections and life experience, and that's what you get.
I think there's a fine balance here. Like, administrators aren't experts, and I think we do need some expertise around what we do in the next steps, because there's no doubt it's a risk to the game. There's going to be lawsuits and so on. So we have to be seen to be doing something because it's going to happen. So,
or do we just say, look, guys,
Jimmy,
it's a risky sport, and here's some of the consequences of playing the sport. Like, there are lots of professions that have short-term and long-term risks attached to them. So if we're talking about all-cause mortality and talking about potential lifespan, health span, if you're in the aviation industry or any industry that disrupts circadian rhythm, it is well documented about the effects of lifespan, and that is shortened if you affect. So it's just part of it. Like, you can't keep going. So if the game really, if it was concerned about long-term health consequences, you would never play of an evening.
I understand that. But how are you going to tell a parent that you're trying to track the game? We've got the women in the game now. Like, there's broader issues, I think, from a risk point of view, and we have to look at those. Otherwise, I just don't think we can simply say that. Like, it's risky. You're going to get knocked down. You could permanently have long-term damage. I just don't reckon that's going to be good enough.
But you have to be living under a rock to not know that there's lifespan implications for playing rugby league. There's been so much coverage about CTE now and head knocks and the long-term impact of that stuff. But people, when you play this game now, there's potential risks involved. I think everyone who plays the game knows that. Whether they accept its reality or not, or they think it's not going to happen to me, but they know that there's been evidence and people who've suffered because they've played the game. I think everyone who plays the game or gets involved, parents know it now, and still put their kids in it. I don't think that's a secret. I think people know that. There's been enough coverage of it. I mean, you've done a podcast, several podcasts.
How do you package that up then, as a game point of view? How do you package it up?
I think we have already started to package it up. Like, I think Mezzy's sort of touched on a point there before that, when me and Mezzy were playing, that you didn't do the technique type of stuff. You used to tackle bags, and without a doubt, I would have had. I played for 10 years. I would have had 5 concussions, bad ones, probably per year, and that without a doubt. Some ones I can't remember going home from the game. These days, we do so much on technique and player safety at training. I would be surprised. Some players, that are exiting in the game are probably, hopefully, only haven't had an HIA, a bad one, because of the technique and the way the game is. You can't tackle in the head. You know, we're protecting the player as much as we can do. Every minute of every game, it is player protection and about the head. That is the main point. And I think we are. The training and the coaching that the players get, the wrestle and the contact is first class. And it's only going to get better. It's only going to get better.
Yeah. I think some of the rules and regulations that have come in, especially things like stand-down policy, it's to protect people from themselves. Yeah. Because especially...
Even the ones in games where people get pulled off.
Well, yeah.
You never want to come off.
Yeah. And that's it. That's young men doing things that... they're fringe members of society. They're very extreme characters that think this is the be-all and potential end-all of what life is all about. It's playing this sport in this moment. Like, I can't think about myself as a 68-year-old man or a 70-year-old man. Like, I can't comprehend that. Like, and maybe we need to go further in protecting young people from themselves. One of those is that kick-off. Probably a higher level of risk involved in the kickoff, but then it's part of the attraction. And I guess...
Have they been kicking off since 1908?
Yeah, it is an attraction. And you know what? Fans love violence. Like, it's a violent sport. They do. When you go watch a UFC fight or a boxing match, you don't want to see a split decision on points. You see someone get knocked out.
I saw a stat the other day, though, Jimmy. The amount of, and I was of the belief that the banning of the kickoff was inevitable because I think I don't necessarily agree with it, but I just thought the game was heading down that path. But then I saw a stat the other day on the percentage of HIAs from kickoffs, and it's minimal. Like the percent, I know there's been some spectacular ones, and they get a lot of headlines, right? Because what happens. When someone gets knocked out from a kickoff, it is spectacular. And what happens for the opening kickoff, it's big news because it
is rare.
It's very rare.
People are attracted to it, and some people might disagree with that comment, but I think there's an attraction to seeing that level of violence.
Do you know when it mostly happens? To the defending player as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, and that's where Flanagan comes back down to talking about
technique,
repetition at training. You need to practice in different situations, different scenarios, how to get your body in and which way your body's got to go to fit.
Don't dip too early, you know.
Practice like
100% we do.
We do.
If Aaron Woods is carrying the ball back, he's a tall man.
Yeah. So a different body shape.
And if James is carrying it back, he's a different body shape again. So we need to understand that. The two that stick out for me this year are obviously the Moses Sully one on Anzac Day.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that had a little bit to do with Jaden Sewer. He bumps him at the last minute and ricochets him into the tackle.
Yep.
So there's, that's a one-off type thing. And then the one recently is in the semi-final across here at Allianz where Tolu Kola just dips too early and just clips him, gets
his angle really wrong.
Gets his angle really wrong. So they're technique things again.
Yeah. And how do you get better at that?
Practice. But also now that the Nelson one, so how do you stop players tackling high? Nelson will change his technique. People will be aware. The game has addressed it, I feel, with the format suspension. He missed a grand final.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big punishment.
And playing for his country.
And playing for his country. So the game has addressed it. So if he got 1 week, I don't think we've addressed it, but he got 4, a grand final, that's a big punishment. So I think everyone, definitely us as a club, will practice kickoffs. And it's probably the only 2 parts of the game that you actually get, a kickoff, and then if we're kicking the ball long and the fullback's bringing it back, why don't fullbacks have that chance of all that happen when the fullback's bringing the ball back? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they don't, the fullback has a little bit more footwork and he's trying to find space. And
uses deception.
And we're kicking off to another front rower, and then we've got this big ball against big ball, and we want to show some authority, and we're getting the concussion. So that's what you're talking about, James, that people love it.
Yeah, they do.
And we just got to make sure that we don't have the Nelson bit where we hit someone in the head. And or we practice a little bit more that we make sure we don't knock ourselves out.
I think on the fullback one as well, like it's in play. It's not from a paused restart. And
there's space somewhere, should be.
There should be. And for everyone that says, let's ban the kickoff, the Kohler example is one to say, okay, well, what do we replace it with? A tap start or play the ball? The very next play, there was Jake is involved in an incident that required a head injury assessment. It's like, well, what do you replace the beginning of the game? Like, do we go to the AFL model and it's a bounce and it's a contested possession, similar to, it would reduce that, alpha v alpha collision. But
that's what rugby is, but.
Well, exactly. It's just, we need to educate on it's just part of the game and it's an inherent risk of the game.
I would say, Jimmy, the game's pretty resilient. Like, we took the punch out. Everyone threw their hands up in the air and said, that's an outrage. And now no one talks about it anymore. So I would say if we took the kickoff out, in 5-10 years' time, people will forget there was a kickoff one day. So
what's the alternative?
I don't know what the alternative is. I don't necessarily think they should take it out. I'm just saying people go, well, if you take the kickoff out, you ruin the fabric of the game. I don't think that's right. I think the game moves on. I think the game moved on from the punch. I'm trying to think what else we took out. We've taken out the I can't remember. We have a scrum, or rather than the scrum, we now have a play the ball, right?
Yeah, we're allowed dropouts,
the shoulder charge. Sorry, that's a good one.
Yeah, short kickoffs, drop out, and it's all eliminated that. Big collision, I suppose, to get people going short dropouts.
The game's more resilient than the kickoff, was what I'm saying. How many kickoffs are there in a game? 5, 6?
Well, I would say that there's a kickoff in every game to start the game, like a big attraction piece. There wasn't always a punch thrown in every game. There wasn't always a shoulder charge in every game.
Most games there probably was back in the day.
So would you say just
that was taken out due to one particular incident involving Paul Gallen and Nick
but that was a build-up over time, Jimmy.
I think back then there wasn't a punch in every game. There wasn't punches thrown in every game. There was a lot of push and shove and all that. I played in that era, and I can't recall there being fights in every game. Otherwise, that would have happened earlier. And again, there's not knockouts off the kickoff in every game. If that was happening, maybe we would see alarm bells.
I'm not saying I think it's banned, Jimmy.
But what
I think
there
the
is,
game's really safe at the moment. I'm just saying,
I think the example,
if it does go, the game will move on.
I think the example of the punch and the example of the shoulder charge. Now, in the example of the knockout off the kickoff, that is an extreme consequence of an event that happens in every game that draws eyeballs to our sport. I think it's something that separates us from most other games. That when you, as a viewer, I want to see the beginning. That's not true in all of the sports. Something like soccer, something like AFL. I'll tune in whenever because. Or maybe towards the back end when the action happens. The action is there.
What's the first thing you tune in for the State of Origin? You want to watch that kickoff run?
Yeah, but you can watch it anyway. People aren't tuning in. Otherwise, people would switch off as soon as the kickoff was over.
No, they wouldn't because it's part of the.
And if it's huge, they want to keep watching to see more hits happen.
You'd be like rugby, like you get all hyped up and there's a short kickoff. It's not the same, is it? It's not.
Yeah. I think just as a code, we'll manage it. We'll manage it, especially as clubs, because we don't want one to be lose a player through a HIA. So we'll practice it in the off-season and we'll more than likely get down there. Hopefully the kick, we'll catch them. When I talk about we'll catch them on the comeback rather than having that big collision and then trying to gain a few metres after collision that we can catch him and then drive him backwards. We just probably don't want that big collision that we talk about.
The hard thing is the players are getting faster and stronger. That's the hard thing to overcome. The hits are way harder than 20 years ago. So how do we overcome that? That's the difficult part.
I think, Flanagan, you raised a good point there around, like, you suspend people out of doing it. And even it's not the only play that has a greater degree of possibility of a concussion being sustained. The up and in style defence from the outside backs with we're usually on the fullback, the stars of the game. The way to shut that down is jam defence and hit as soon as they get the ball. That both players travelling at tremendous speeds, almost a lack of control by the defender. We saw Joseph Suolihi do it on Reece Walsh. That's the correct play, but he got it completely wrong. So what do? You suspend that out of the game. It's not the really, again, to that point of the punch. It's not the only incident where the risk of concussion seems to be increased.
You're talking about the kick-off.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I get, well, Flano's right. Suspending blokes for a long period is a deterrent, right, to that sort of stuff. But I just think the kick-off is just because you've got two big blokes hurtling towards each other, that would seem more at risk for me than what you're talking about, the up and in defence and blokes. And I think blokes have actually the Suolihi thing was a bit of an exception. I mean, he completely lost control, Joe.
Well, no, the same thing happened to Dominic Young on Blake Tapp.
Yeah, but I think guys have learned from that. I haven't seen too many guys lose control in the latter stages of the season on that sort of thing. So, I think Flano's right. You just need to suspend blokes. That's the alternative to potentially getting rid of the kickoff. You just suspend blokes, because what that'll do is the next bloke who goes, Nelson will have learned his lesson. The next bloke who goes to do it will probably go on with and take a little bit more care when they go in to make those sort of tackles.
Well, if you said to me, 5-10 years ago when I started coaching, that we're going to practice kick-off defence, I'd look at you and go, what?
Yeah.
I haven't got time for that. Let's move on. But we'll practice it. And, we've already practiced it this year. Who we want to make our back rower, our third man in or our fourth man in, we want him to make it on an inside shoulder tackle and all those type of things. And that's where the game's going, and hopefully that there's not too many of them. And I don't feel that there was this year.
Well, as I said, the percentage is really... The amount of concussions
they're just spectacular when they happen.
Minimal. It's just that everyone gets up off their chair when it happens because they get excited about it. You're right, it looks spectacular.
And there's no, for me, looking at the side that happened against is the Roosters. It happened a few against the Roosters. Guess why? Because there's Jared on the other side.
Yep.
And let's be honest, if you let Jared charge India and he's going through and knocking people over, we haven't started well. That's what I'm telling them. That's a fine line.
And that will continue with people like Spencer Lenu, Nelson himself. Like, if kicking off to him, you're like, we can't afford to let him bend the line
straight away.
Yeah. Why don't you kick away from Jared?
Well, they'll have another one on the other side. But
But if you make a statement with Jared, then you're on top straight away.
Okay.
And you got kickers that like kick into that, right foot kickers like kicking to their left and so on. There's a bit goes into it, but you're right, mate, I had Andrew Fafita that he used to go and watch a little bit of video and watch out which side they kicked, and he'd tell Woodsy to go to the other side so he could get kickoff meters.
No, in the end,
we knew that much thought went into the kickoff.
We put him underneath the post, remember?
Yeah.
Just so he could get it from either side. They kick either side, the half goes straight to further under the post. He loved
kickoff meters.
It's 20 metres.
And he still runs, so I would.
You said that, not me.
Love you, Fifth.
Just some of the things as well to look at the player welfare perspective. There's been a number of incidences in the press lately. Obviously, the tragic passing of Keith Titmus, which was deemed an unacceptable training session by the coroner. We've got former players Jackson Tapine, Lloyd Perrott pursuing lawsuits to their former clubs around the treatment, the health and safety, the workload, workspace health and safety. Of course, it's very important, but I think rugby league itself and most professional sports would sit outside the usual health and safety workplace protocols. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah, you're probably right. I had one recently, and it happened in a game, and obviously with Hame Sele.
Oh, yeah.
So Hame Sele had a bit of a virus a week or two prior, and went into a game at Cogra Oval and wasn't feeling that well. And I look back at that, and for me, I go, what would have happened if that was at training? We wouldn't have had the doctor. We wouldn't have had the doctor's advice, which obviously, recognised that his heart rate, he was struggling in a number of areas, breathing and so on. That was just at training, and I said, come on, get back on the line or do something, you know. It's such a fine line, and it just sort of made me sit up and think, oh, we're pretty lucky that we had the medical staff there at training and we're on top of it, because he was in hospital for a week with, you know, fluid on the heart, and it was pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
I had one of Dragons once. It was before one of my first game there. We flew to Sunshine Coast, and we had a captain's run. Tautau Moga had a regular heartbeat, and they didn't know what was wrong. But like you said, because it was close to a game, the doctor flew with us, and they were lucky enough. Like, he didn't get to participate in the game, but he stayed in hospital all weekend. But it's a funny one. If the doctors aren't at training, God knows what could happen.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Obviously, sat through the Titmus case. It was, you know, hard to listen, particularly for the parents. But the one thing is that we've altered. Obviously, there's recommendations which we've taken them up as a club, and one of them is to, at the start of pre-season, to just go easy in the beginning and ease in over a certain amount of weeks. And Seams actually did that anyway this year. And I think that you can't just presume everyone's coming fit. So there is there is work health and safety actually. You've got to be careful.
Training, it has changed over the years. Like, I remember, like, I went from Bulldogs when I first went there. We were just getting punished. And I remember when we went to Cronulla, Andrew Gray, like, I went straight over there, and then he had like you'd be good at telling Flano, like, his whole schedule, whole season was mapped out on what he wanted to achieve, what we're doing, the loading, everything. Like, I remember we were getting absolutely towed up. The days were big, and some of the sessions we did at the Dogs were long. But when I went to the Sharks, we did a couple of con drills, but he pulled me out of a couple as well. So, in saying, no, this is what I've got for you. You know, you're only new to our system. I just want to bring you in. And we were playing at that time as well. Like, they had a really good guide on it. I thought Andrew Gray was in particular really good.
Yeah, well, he's one of the best in the business, you know, and you know, I think, you know, not criticising what you're doing at the Dogs, I think every club, NRL club, has changed in relation to, you know, flogging players to fatigue levels is not the way to go anymore. It's just, you know, it's high performance. It's about building athletes rather than breaking athletes. I think that's probably the point, that, you know, your pre-season, you know, Mezzy just spoke about gradual increases, and I think that, you know, every club will approach it a little bit different, but we're building our athlete to get to a point to pre-Christmas, post-Christmas, trials, and there's definitely a plan in place where you need to be, you know, body composition, you know, obviously your fitness levels and so on, that, you know, they understand what, you know, a player of James Graham's height and muscle, what his muscle mass should be, what his fat content should be, his skeletal mass will be. The game has come so far.
But then on that, Flano, is there not room for, like, mutual suffering and almost an extreme mutual suffering where, you know, one player messes up, we all get punished, or we go to an army camp where, you know, we're sleep deprived. You know, it's not about optimal performance. We're not trying to build, you know, 100-meter sprint athletes here where you would look to, you know, fine-tune every last detail in order to peak perform at the Olympics event. It's about a long, hard season. We're going to have to put these players through some situations where they're going to be extremely uncomfortable.
Yep, you're exactly right. And just listening to your talk there about, and we spoke about it earlier, like you said too, when you would not change anything in your rugby league career, you knew the risk. You didn't sign a waiver. You just knew you signed a contract. You knew the risk. When you do the army camp and so on, you nearly sign waivers. You do sign waivers that we're going to put you in an extreme condition.
Yeah.
You understand that, and you sign a waiver.
Because there's a mental side of that of sport, and it's about finding how a little bit of coaching is who's in.
Well, that's the nature of our game, but too, like, and that's why the fans love it and we love it.
And you've got to find a point of difference as well, because if everyone's just fine tuning their athletes,
if I don't push you, James, to your limit, how good do I know how good could you be? Some players' limit is, you know, and we've spoken. Woodsy spoke about it. I'll go back to him. He's probably one of the better ones. Is Paul Gallant. He could push himself to extreme levels, paying for his body shape. He couldn't win any races, but he had this ability just to be able to be pushed. We saw in his boxing career, he had this mental strength. Now, what we need to do as a club is just to find out what's your tipping point. Yours is different than Reedy's and different than Woodsy's. So we've got to challenge you in those areas. So it is a fine line. Do we challenge you and you tip over the edge and something negative happens towards you? You injure yourself or, God forbid, even something worse. So there's a fine line that as a coaching staff that we want to push as far as we can, but not hurt or injure.
So I was going to say, Jimmy, I think there's a difference though between, you mentioned an army camp as opposed to maybe a punishment. I think from the outside looking in, they're two different things for me. Because an army camp, I spoke to the Melbourne blokes last week about, they do a camp called I Don't Quit, which is 2 nights you go away, second night you stay up all night, and you get pushed to the edge basically. But at the end of that camp, speaking to Tyrone Wishart about it, there's a real sense of fulfilment that whilst a punishment's not designed for that, but it's designed to denigrate you, to in my view, to...
No. A football punishment is not there to denigrate you.
Well, it depends what the punishment is.
No, I think most of the time punishment if we're all getting punishment, it's trying to get in our game. If Aaron drops the ball, we all get punished. Yeah. That's the difference. And James can understand that message, that we're trying to show to them if one person stuffs up in a football game.
But is there a limit where you can go with that, Slono? Is there a limit to that?
There is, yeah. Of course there is. There's a limit in everything we do, and that's the balancing act. Now, that's why we employ high-performance staff that are the best of their business. We have our medical staff that are the best in the business and screen and test players before they walk onto a football field. So it is really important that, once again, we go back to the duty of care.
Well, also, so things like sleep deprivation or even the deprivation of fluids, like in action, you can't just stop and say, hey, I'm just going to, I need a drink. Like it's probably a model that's used in military situations. Like the military train and look to break and then rebuild. But because they know they're going into action, that they can't just say, I'm just going to have a, you know what, it's my bedtime. It's my bedtime now.
Yeah, but in the game, you've got to get 8 hours
with
sleep.
the army camp stuff, that's been going on for years, right? Teams have been doing that.
But then in your own training environment, you've still got to look to push people to the absolute extreme. And like Flan said, that edge. And maybe it's at different points for different people. We'll get on to the punishment stuff because that obviously was a highlight of the Jackson to Pine case. But Tony,
I was just saying that you got to be careful because particularly in the Titmus case, you got to monitor, like you said, all the pre-work's got to be done, the screening and so on. Sometimes there's underlying issues, and to push people through that, can end in a bad situation. So I think we've got to be careful, given what's happened to us, like putting everything in place we can to avoid it.
Well, again, is it the club's or the game's responsibility to screen for all of those underlying issues? And even knowing that, so there's genetic heart conditions that, in fact, that happened to me. My sister randomly went to a free health screening. There was a genetic heart condition found in her. She had to stop exercising. She can't do any of that anymore. It obviously all the siblings had to get tested, and I'm like I'm getting tested for. I played sport. They're like, oh no, this could be underlying. And the doctor's like, look, if this comes up, I'm not going to let you play. And I was like, you can get stuffed.
Yeah.
These things exist.
That would have been a good story back in the day, Jimmy.
Well, it was towards the back end of my career. I was fortunate enough to not carry the genetic condition, but this could have gone unnoticed, and it potentially, like if I had the same condition as my sister, like an event could have happened on the field. Thankfully, I wasn't diagnosed with that condition. I don't carry the genetic condition, but these things can happen and exist. But how much information do you need? How much can you screen for? Even on the issue of concussion, there's genes that people carry that are more susceptible, mean you're more susceptible to degenerative brain issues. Like if you get gene tested and you've got that one gene that increases your risk of dementia, do you then stop playing? Like,
Look, I just think it's a broader game issue. You're talking about club v NRL. I think you need to have consistency across all clubs. Because it happened to Manly, it was, it was damn unlucky in a lot of ways. It was underlying. We didn't know that. So, but it could happen to any club. So that's the issue. I think
it could happen to anyone in any fitness, in any walk of life.
Did we do heart checks? We talked about it.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Years ago. So that's what I'm saying. Underlying issues like what can we do more as a game to avoid it? And we've put all the recommendations that got put forward to Manly, but it's a broader game issue. And I think it's definitely an NRL job to ensure that all clubs avoid this situation.
And there's so many different types of athletes, James. You would have known when you played that there's blokes that can go for long periods of time at high intensity, and there's other players within your squad that are elite, powerful athletes. I'll use Moses Suli for an example. He could, knock over a small building, but you could probably knock it over 3 or 4 times where he's got one explosive effort. But that's the type of athlete he is, and we need those athletes in our game. And it's up to your high performance staff that he's not going to win any 1.2. He can't run 5K. He's an explosive athlete, and that's why we love him. So that's where high performance has gone now. It's not back in the day, especially when I was playing, that run for 5Ks and see who'd win it and all that sort of stuff. We're way ahead of that.
Just on, really, you brought up the punishment side of things, and the Jackson to Pine case has come to light in terms of he's pursuing it for a number of reasons, but fundamentally the argument he was late for a training session, didn't live up to team standards, and that was the consequences. That is a form of punishment which involved wrestling. For me, it was just extra training. Like that probably wouldn't exist in any other workspace.
So why is he complaining about it? Well, I don't understand.
Well, he was saying he's put on show, and I can't remember the exact terminology, but the
level punishment
was overbearing, and it was too much. And basically, it broke him down, and he struggled mentally as a result of that. That's his argument. Obviously, the law will play out in court. As it stands at the moment, it's still in court, and I think it's due this month for some evidentiary stuff. I
think a feeling of embarrassment.
You seem ashamed. You're saying ashamed.
Feel ashamed. It's important that I don't know if this case gets passed.
In what sense?
If this case is successful, then I could go back and look at my career and think I was abused by staff, physically, emotionally, mentally. That's
it'll have repercussions. I don't know. You'd be able to tell us,
the floodgates then just open.
Has it had repercussions in terms of potential punishments? Maybe.
Well, I think Messi would be more about the Titmus case, that there has been recommendations.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure of what happened in this case, but there'll be one way or another. There'll be recommendations, and clubs will have to, as Manly have reacted to them. And as I said, time will tell. I don't want to make light of any of those cases, but I'm going to take Manly. See if I can talk to Messi after this about a case that I had, a trip to Mudgee, that I had to sleep in the same tent as Anthony Seibold, and he snored all night, and I got no sleep.
Was that when it was having?
Yeah, to make the tent for him too, didn't you?
Oh, that was
this one's interesting.
That was a bad army camp.
Footy clubs, footy clubs have. Some footy clubs have had punishments for a long time, whether it's roll the dice or spin the wheel. Or
we have them still.
You still have them still. But
best part of the week.
The question in this situation will be whether the punishment was too extreme. And then as a result of that, if he's successful, and it could be ages away, right? Every club will have to review what sort of punishments they've got in place, because if it's too overbearing, or if this case lands in favour of Jackson Topine, every club will have to review the punishments they
there
put
will be
in place.
players coming out of the woodwork if this gets
I don't think there will, would you? I think that's...
mate, the punishment that I'm hearing what he got, I have seen...
They just had to wrestle all the players in the team. Right?
And how does that change?
That's up for up for debate.
Okay, 30 blokes or something, apparently.
No, I think there's a time frame where you just wouldn't do them all. But this is an extra. It's a training drill that is commonplace.
Is it commonplace, though, Jimmy?
It's like shark bait. We would call
that's
shark
what it's
bait.
referred to as shark bait.
Does it still apply so
you
this?
wrestle a fresh
In a
person.
wrestling session, yes.
Yeah, you wrestle a fresh person for a period of
Some could be a
45
period of time. Some could be if you win, you get out of the circle.
Well, but if I'm a club and I'm still doing this after this case has gone to a court, I think you're mad.
But
why would you keep doing it if there's a case before the court?
So what are you supposed to do if a player's late?
You just have to wrestle a heap of blokes.
So what-
There's a
what-
million
what-
punishments. Fine him.
That might
Can't you just fine him?
That might degrade him.
Why can't you fine him?
Well, I guess you could, but then you're taking away this
Why
person's
can't you drop him?
livelihood.
If he's late for training, why can't you drop him?
Well, yeah, that is one thing. Well,
Yeah.
we've seen players get late.
But if you're a club-
players have been late for the bus, and they've been fined.
Jimmy,
They've been taken away from the match day squad.
I'd rather wrestle than get dropped from the match.
Yeah, but
team.
Woods, if you've got a case before the Supreme Court that could find that this kid may win, just say he does win, right? And
As I said to you,
the club's found culpable, and they've got to pay.
there's going
this
to be
kid
people coming out of
compensation.
woodwork for this. If this has happened,
But if you're still doing it now with this case going on, and you're still making blokes wrestle, let's argue whatever it is, 10, 20, 30 blokes as a punishment, you're mad. Look, I wouldn't let
No, hang on a minute.
It's not a punishment, but it's not a punishment.
No one's making you do that. No one's making you.
Well, what's the alternative, Jim? Get out and leave the club. You're not here. Welcome here anymore.
Exactly.
Well, that's ridiculous.
no,
you know what?
no,
If
no,
you did that,
no,
Jim,
no, it's no-
you'd have another legal case in
No,
your
no,
hands.
no, it's not.
Yes, you would. I'm telling you right now, you would.
No one's forcing you to go to
If
training.
you did that, that'd be worse than this
No
situation.
one's forcing you to go to training. No one's forcing you to compete in the 1.2 time trial. No one's forcing you to play the game on a
That's
Friday
not a
night.
punishment, though. That's not a punishment.
That's a different situation. If I'm late, the consequences of being late, here's the consequence. I can just go, I'm not doing it.
So be it. And then what? Don't do it. And then what happens? You probably get told you're not playing this weekend.
Yeah.
Go find another club.
Yeah.
And then you would have a legal case.
Yeah, I know, but-
Then you would have a legal case anyway, Jimmy. And you'd actually have a worse one because you can't do that. You have the
But if-
players' union all over you.
If the players said they didn't want to engage in any form of training, like
Well,
it's
that's-
just
no,
extra
that's-
training,
that's-
or it's a punishment.
It's not, Jimmy. It's framed as a punishment.
It's framed as a punishment.
Yeah.
All it is extra training to not meeting team standards, which I think we can all agree on needs to be different from any usual place of work.
Yeah, but the
Workspace.
question in this case is whether it was in the extreme. I don't have a position on it. We'll wait and see what happens in the court. But what I'm saying to you is, if you've got a case like this before the Supreme Court, and there's a chance it lands in his favour, and you're a club and you're still doing this as a punishment, you're insane.
Well, one, he didn't have to. He didn't have to. But you don't have to
But
go
what's
in.
the alternative, Jim?
Okay, you know the consequence for not buying into what your team and club do. In any, you don't have to go and work for for Fox Sports. But what's the consequence? You get moved on. It's just a part of life. No one's forcing you to do anything.
Well, they are. If you want to play for that football club, they are.
Yeah, but you've also, if you want to play for the football club, you've got to eat right, you've got to train well.
They're not punishments, Jimmy. That's not a punishment.
Yeah, but
It's a separate matter.
Well, surely timekeeping is an important aspect of playing for a football club.
Yes,
And
but, but the question is whether it was in the extreme, Jim. That's what I'm saying. I don't have a position on it.
So
I'm just telling you the situation.
I'm saying that I don't think it is, and I think, like Woodsy says, what we can't have is people is trainers and staff walking on eggshells because the club culture will go down the pan. You've got to have a consequence for not meeting team standards.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you.
Like, think about being ashamed, right? And we talk about shame. Like, most football clubs that I've been a part of, I've had a fat club. A fat
in the modern society,
I was
not
in
the thing to
fat
do.
club.
I
I was in
wouldn't
fat
call them
squad.
that club.
I never
That's
heard of
a
it.
recommendation.
I was in a fat school.
It's changed. I'm never in it. It's changed to Bodyworks.
There you go.
I was not up to standard.
So, okay, yeah, it's called not okay.
Nuts.
Like
Called nuts.
I've come in overweight, and the club has made this. It's made up in terms of what my weight should be or what my skin fold should be. I've not met that team standard. Now I have to come in an hour before everybody else all pre-season and be punished physically on a treadmill, on an exercise bike, because this standard hasn't been met.
Yep.
I feel ashamed.
Punishment.
I will.
That's fine. I'm not arguing against punishment.
But is that not humiliation?
But you just said that before.
No, I didn't. I didn't say that. I said the question is whether this punishment was extreme or over the top. That's the issue. I don't have an issue with punishments. Do what you want.
The fact
I don't care.
goes for longer.
Okay, so
That's fine.
it's my understanding that this is
been
just
put over a fact
this
line.
is just extra training that has led to humiliation.
Okay, but Timmy, I'm saying to you, you're missing my point.
Go
What
on.
I'm saying to you is, I don't have an issue with
Yeah.
punishment. It doesn't worry me. But this is before the Supreme Court, right? That this kid was made to wrestle all these blokes as a form of punishment, and there's a chance he wins. So if you're a footy club right now and you're still doing that, you're putting yourself at risk of a similar situation.
So you're saying take out that particular
Yes,
punishment.
take that one out. Yes.
Flano, has it changed how you have set up, I guess, the list of punishments for not meeting team standards, whether it be timekeeping, whether it be weight management, whether it be performance-based?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the bit that I get out of Reedy is that this is going to court to find out if it was extreme.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's in NRL standards, and which is probably going to be tested. You know, from other clubs, you know, and other experts would come in and value. But have we changed? I think, you know, obviously what's happened to Manly, it's made all people in different areas, you know, the high performance area, they're basically in control of the running and, you know, the gym stuff that, you know, they're protected and they're making sure that they're well educated and they don't put players in situations where, you know, there's going to be an issue. So I think, you know, as a game, we're leaps and bounds ahead of because of the professionalism and, you know, the right people in the right spaces. Our medical staff, you know, unheard of when, you know, I was playing that you'd have a doctor at training. Our doctors are there regularly. The tests that we do prior to players entering the field of play, you know, as I said, they're having ECGs, you know, the blood testing and all that sort of stuff we're doing as much as we can as a game, I believe.
Yeah. I think it's evolved where it's an actual workplace. There's the issue, right? It's like a normal workplace, but rugby league is not a normal workplace. But that's where we've transformed into. It's a workplace, and that's the issue now. Everything's changed forever, and you notice now, me as a CEO has noticed the workplace has changed itself.
Yeah,
with the administration, football, and so on, it's actually under the same roof, and before it was separate, if that makes sense. So I think that's the key. It's a workplace.
It's a very different workplace, though. I mean, on the subject of punishments, one of the punishments for not scoring a try in the regular season used to be running a lap without clothes.
You do that anyway, even if you scored twice.
Well, I get and this is, I guess, an issue that clubs would have to look at. It'd be the annual season get-together where...
See, I even see that. That doesn't happen at our club. I think it's a myth. I think it's I know it might happen with him because he used to do it every year.
It's been phased out, I would say.
I'd be very
it's now a
surprised.
voluntary thing.
We're more worried about what happens when you do it, so it doesn't happen. With the social media, people can take photos.
I don't think
we're representing our club, and that's not the best way to represent your club.
But maybe if it was... I know of clubs where it's the end-of-season celebration held internally, and it's been
4 points past.
So
Anyone's
just-
doing 4 points past.
Same at Wollongong, they're walking around.
Yeah,
so, you know,
imagine that. See Woodsy running past them.
Dawn till dusk.
and Woodsy takes a fair time to get the 100 done.
There's like 400.
That's the point though, Jimmy, right? The world's changed, right? So back in when you were playing, 30 runs happened. Now, by the sounds of it, not many clubs do it. So it's a bit like punishments, right? Punishments were commonplace 10, 15,
Oh,
15 years ago.
punishments if you don't score tries.
But the punishments have evolved, right?
or initiations used to happen
Yes.
at certain football clubs that it involved some very extreme things. Some people are made to sing when they make their
Well, that's
debut.
what happens. You look at the NFL, all the rookies get up and sing a song.
It's degrading
as well, yeah.
I'd feel ashamed having to sing. But, I mean, it's just a human
I've heard
emotion.
you watched you, so I'd be ashamed as well.
Who would deny me the fact that I felt ashamed singing?
You're
and
taking a bit
embarrassed?
to the extreme, Jimmy.
Am I? Okay, well, we need to figure out where the line.
Well, that's what we're going to figure out.
Because the
court of law's going to figure it out.
There was
Jimmy.
some initiations in our sport that certainly now, in terms of what Tony's saying about a workplace, just would be. And again, this is where, are we going to open Pandora's box here?
Potentially, yeah.
So I look at it, and one of my best mates, and Woodsy knows him, he works for the Special Forces in the Army, and he's a selector. They start with 200 or so of the best soldiers in Australia, and they get down to about 12, and they break them. They break them physically, mentally, over long periods of time. A couple of months it takes to get to them. In rugby league, where it is a ruthless, you have to be physically and mentally strong. So we need to put you through close as we can to those sort of situations and circumstances as we can, but don't break you. And so it's a tough environment. It is a unique environment, and people to come to NRL training sessions or a week in preparation for a big NRL game, they'd be amazed at what goes on and how ruthless it is. But you need to expose your players to that for them to be able to do it on the weekend.
And obviously live at very high standards,
Yeah.
which, again, for some people, rocking up to a meeting 5 minutes late or a podcast on a Monday 5 minutes late is acceptable.
Cost me a coffee.
Talking of workloads on players, the number of fixtures that the players are subjected to, where are we at with this? Is the season potentially too long?
It has to be this length, but doesn't it, for the teams? Sorry.
We touched on this last week. I mean, I'd like to see the same amount of games. I'm not saying less games, but longer seasons. So, as I said last week, I'd like to see the State of Origin 3 or 4 weeks. I think I'd like to see the quality of the comp games stay at a level. I think, there's Manly South there during the season, Woodsy, where I said there was 8,000, there was 5,000 a core, and the match, it was not where we want to be as a game. So, I just think even if you have to lengthen it, but play the same amount of games. That makes sense, because we don't want to lessen the revenue, and we're competing against other sports. So, yeah.
What about backing you up from State of Origin? Should that be allowed, or should that be deemed like too dangerous, like too risky, too much to put on the players?
Yeah, well, we had 3 buys, and a lot of clubs would have had 2 buys through that Origin period. So I think maybe once we've had to back players up. We had 3 players in Origin this year, and I think only once they had to back up. Once again, I think from a high performance perspective, and that that we do let those players recover well, and if there's any chance of injury because of the fatigue levels, or there's a chance that the mental side of things. I know a couple of clubs, especially the clubs that regularly have players, Penrith and Melbourne, in those sort of situations, plan on resting players during that period. Some clubs just don't have the luxury to rest because of the competition, where they stand on the competition table. So that's a fine line. But yeah, you need to, and I listened to Mez talk last week about Daly Cherry Evans. He came back off a losing series, and it took him a couple of weeks to get over it. And that wasn't physically, that was mental.
I think you got a plan in place as well for those blokes, because, like you said, you're going to have 2 buys around that Origin period. We had Jakey and Ches and Hamoli. Hamoli missed the last game. I think got dropped, but then we lost him with suspension. But their loads were completely different to what we did. Yeah, they backed up, but we probably didn't really see him from training till captain's run, and then they played.
Yeah. I just think I'd be careful as a game. I really do, because the game's never been faster. That's my issue, and the fans deserve to see the quality players every week.
And just on that theme of before, we talked about concussion, protecting players from themselves. Like, there's no way a player that plays a rep game is going to take themselves out of the game the following week. Like we see players, but no, they wanted to back up. Well, of course they do. Like they're heavily invested in this. They don't see the long-term implications or the long-term consequences of playing 2 days after a state of origin, short-term or long-term. Like that, we know medically speaking, it's not good for the players.
Some of the toughest conversations I've had over a period of time are telling players they're not playing.
Because they think they know best. Like, coach, I'm fine.
Because of fatigue, because of origin and so on. As I said, at the Sharks, we had 4 or 5 for most years. And, I was looking at the big picture type of thing and being right at the end of the season and to tell players that they weren't playing, I knew it was always going to be tough conversations and they wouldn't agree with it.
Just quickly, before we wrap this up, the RLPA and the role that they play, Woodsy, are they going in the right direction? Are they doing a good job?
Yeah, I think they are, mate. Obviously, they cop a lot of flack. Through the grand final weekend, being a retiree player, they had a couple of, I don't know, what would you say, like seminars? Yeah. And just
go to a pub, is that a seminar?
Come on, mate. We stay at a hotel. It was all about transitioning into the real life. They'll just
responsible drinking seminar.
That was different players, mate. That was different players. I didn't even drink, mate. I was all right reading.
Oh, okay.
But there's just so many things they've set up. You'd know yourself, Jimmy. Places we can contact. I've got a transition manager in New South Wales, which is Joe Nullival. There's one in Queensland, which is, I think it's Keegan Hipgrave. They say like they plan a lot of catch-ups and all that sort of stuff. Look, I'm only just new to the space, so I've still got to see what happens.
You wouldn't have time to see anyone with all your jobs. With all your jobs.
I haven't got a job, mate.
Come on.
Just working with this Triple M.
He's got a job. He's got about 10 jobs.
They used to. You got more than me.
Maybe.
So there's so many things, so many areas that they're working hard on. Like they were talking about stuff when you get injured. I think from 2018, you don't have to. So when you have your medical, in recent years, you'd have to only have 1 year to get surgery on that. But I think from any injuries or pre-existing ones from 2018 on onwards, you can get that fixed now if you can prove it. They're in there trying to help. Do they have full say with the NRL? Probably not yet, but they're still trying to work on that relationship. As we know, it's pretty vocal, and we've seen the likes of Andrew Abdo and Clint Newton. They probably don't get on the best, but they're trying to resolve their issues and, come to a good conclusion.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Anything that we'd like to keep, change, stay the same? Tony, I'll start with you.
I just think anything we can do to protect our players, like in general, I think we have to do. I think our duty as both the NRL and clubs is to protect the players. So whatever we have to do that, I think we should. But the game's in a great place.
Shane?
Yeah, I think we're keep doing what we're doing in the player welfare. We're doing the best we can. We've got experts in this space looking after the players, 7 days a week. So continue that path.
Yeah, the welfare's been good. Obviously, they employ. So we got Timmy G at our club. He's exceptional. But this is the contact one. Look, you obviously got to reduce it. I'd love to see the process they go through to see how they come up with what's a certain amount of time. So, just the reduction in the contact, obviously. But I'd love to be part of it or see the process, how it works.
Brent Reid, just saying, mate, you want to see the kick-off band? Come on.
I reckon the game's safer than it's ever been. I think they're doing a great job. You just got to stay vigilant and stay on the front foot. And I don't want to see the kick-off band, Jimmy. I just have this sense of inevitability about it. But I think the NRL and the players union, they do a great job with the safety of the game and the safety of the players.
Well, that was a fantastic episode, Charlie. The player welfare discussion was strong and robust as always. And this section of the show where we listen to the comments from our fans, from our listeners, all thanks to Ladbrokes. What a supporter and partner of the show they have been for many a year now. Really appreciate the team there. But let's get into it, Charlie. Some of the issues and the comments that have come up from the media episode.
Correct, Jimmy. I'm loving the roundtable, mate. You're on fire with it. It's so good. And the first one's actually an email. If you do ever want to email us, it's just thebuyround@gmail.com. But this comes from Matt Bowness, and he says, "Hey team, Matt from Christchurch here. Big fan of the buy round and love last week's topic of media and the role it plays. I have to say I'm with Brent Reid. What sets rugby league apart is not only the great game it is, but it's the soap opera around it, the player movements, the coach chat, the scandals, and it's the best soap opera going. If I was to compare it to rugby union here in New Zealand, it's all just so boring. The game has become a pale imitation of the fast, innovative running game of the past, pointless kicking and stupid advantage rules." Basically goes on to say that the journalists provide the entertainment value that brings in the eyeballs to the game.
Well, so the name of that
Matt Bowness.
Matt, I think he makes a very good point. It actually comes up in a later episode that maybe perhaps the soap opera is all part of our love of the great game of rugby league. And look, this EastEnders, Coronation Street, Brookside, Neighbours, home and away. Rugby league is a way better storyline created than those guys. That's not real. This is real life. We have reality TV, which is scripted reality, in my opinion, from what I've witnessed of it. And rugby league, it's human interest story. It plays with our real life emotions. We get upset when a player leaves. We can't believe a player's engaged in a certain activity. And I think I'm with him that. Yeah, and then the opinion pieces, and we see the work going on in the background, and I'm with him. I think if we lost that element, we'd be. I mean, maybe society would be better, but I think we'd be looking for something else to talk about. It's a game that's gone past the 80 minutes now.
Yeah,
it really has. There's the build up, there's the aftermath, but then there's a couple of days there where there's no actual football on it, but people just want to be engaged. It's a great game, and look, there are some negative aspects of it, but I think we just have to accept that. But the soap opera is a great way of describing it.
And like Reedy said, all that drama stuff, it's what rates really well with the audience as well.
Well, arguing rates as well. People disagreeing rates. It's people like to see people arguing on being a passionate, like genuine side on an issue, and somebody has a different side. Like I think that's great. And for me, as somebody who likes to think critically, I think it's important to have those debates.
Yeah, I think also rugby league has some really high quality, talented journalists as well who chase these stories and put a lot of work into to get this information for the fans. Whereas like when I work on cricket, you see these journos and they just basically sit there with their shoes off all day, eating the party pies in the press room. It's a completely different sport. And the way it's reported on is completely different.
Well, Charlie, I've obviously got a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look at what goes on. And I've been in at Fox where stories have been breaking, and the journalists, they are just on the phone constantly. I'll call you back. There was a story this year that was beginning to break. I think it was the David Fafita signing, and the journalists were non-stop for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And they get a lot of flack, but geez, they do some work.
Yeah.
I think you've got to hand it to them. They'll get a sense of a story, and they'll chase and chase and chase until they get something. It's actually quite remarkable what they do behind the scenes.
Reedy's told me before that he makes around 100 phone calls a day as well. It's just crazy. Next one's from YouTube at IPWNism. He says the issue isn't journos, the issue is our society. Raise your kids right to learn how to be respectful and tolerant. The only reason why media publish clickbait stories is because the majority of the society is into that rubbish. Take away the audience for the dribble and they'll start publishing pleasant stories.
Look, I think that person's got a point, but the negative stories and certainly the clickbait headlines, they attract eyeballs. I think in terms of the role model and raising your children right, for me, it's you just can't expect your children to be perfect citizens. You wouldn't be a perfect citizen. We all make mistakes, and when we see a person in the spotlight, embroiled in controversy or making mistakes, and some of these people that are idolized by young fans, whether they like it or they don't, they do become influential in how people act in general life. But again, no one's immune from making mistakes, and I think it's an important conversation as another person of influence in their life, a bit of like a parent guardian to, trust, instill good values in people and make good decisions. It's important that you have that conversation and say, hey, look, this person that you idolize they've done something, they've done the wrong thing here, or in my eyes, they've done the wrong thing. It's inexcusable. Explain to them that, look, mistakes will happen. And you know what? They're going to be consequences for this, just like in real life, just like in your life, just like in their life. If they've been caught up in a situation, they get punished. They get the thing that means the most to them in their life taken away from them for a period of time. And look, but rugby league most of the time is quite forgiving, and they allow them back in. There's a number of things that happen, and again, in most people's lives, they'll be punished for a period of time, but then they're allowed to integrate back into society, their group of friends, whatever it may be. So I think there's lots of lessons you can draw from that. But for me, it's important to have that conversation about road to redemption, punishment, and all that. No, and fundamentally, no one's perfect. We all make mistakes, and some of them are greater than others. Granted, but
I understand what he's also. I think he's also like alluding to the sort of brain rot style content that you're getting these days with like the things on TikTok and Instagram with you're getting filling in those doom scrolling sessions, and then that's leading to, I guess, cheaper style of media with clickbait headlines that draw people in when there's not much, to it at all. Probably got time for one more, I reckon. We'll go. This is on YouTube as well from @DanielTang1972, and he says media plays the biggest role in shaping public perception about the NRL and the talking points. For example, NRL has a major focus on refereeing standards driven by constant coverage as well as commentators. You compare that to rugby union, you don't hear much about refereeing when you watch, which I prefer. A fairer media not focused on generating clicks and traffic as the sole KPI will do wonders for the NRL in the long term and help educate fans more.
It's an interesting point in terms of the refereeing aspect, and just quickly on the influence of the media. Of course, it's huge. Like we look at the politics, and the certain publications will side with one side of the political debate, and sometimes those media mediums have balanced viewpoints, but some clearly side with one political party, and that influences its consumers. And it's no different with an issue like rugby league, whether a coach should be sacked or not, whether a player should be selected for Origin or not, etc., etc. Pretty much any issue, the media is going to influence public perception in anything that is worth talking about, that we care about, which we care about politics, and we care about our sporting teams as well. So undoubtedly, the media do influence that. Sometimes you agree with what they're saying, sometimes you don't, sometimes you're willing to be convinced, sometimes you're not. But the other point there in and around referees, look, I think the reason referees come into criticism is because we come from an industry where we're striving for perfection that's unachievable, and that is in every aspect of the game. Match officials, your team, your own game day officials, your administrative staff. The expectation or the goal is to be perfect. That's not always going to happen. In terms of like comparison to rugby union, and they don't get the match officials being criticised as much, there's probably more laws and rules in rugby union than there is in rugby league. I'd argue it's a slower game, so the referees probably have more time. I'd probably argue from what I've seen, the situations are less, there's less variability, and it's less complex it's not as fast. It's not. It's probably more complex in terms of the scrummaging, but that to referee a scrum, it can chew up the amount of time that it does. There's a lot of penalties. Probably rugby union is a game that is on the surface refereed by the laws of the game more so than rugby league. In rugby league, they let a lot more go because the flow of the game is a little bit more important. And, you know, if we went down the path of rugby union and blowing a lot more penalties, I think that would be detrimental to our product.
The other thing I will say about what he said is about media controlling the narrative. As we have more and more independent media outlets growing, you are going to see, I guess, the change of having that complete constant of thought and that constant opinion and digging down the same issues, because the narrative can't be controlled as easier if the media is spread out more, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there, Charlie.
It's probably it for us then, Jimmy.
Yeah, that's it, Charlie. Been a great chat with you. And yeah, keep the questions, comments coming. We really do appreciate it. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't, but it's always respectful.